So I bought this oscilloscope on eBay, and the question is it going to end in tears? I wanted an analog scope. Don't need anything fancy, but I thought it'd be nice to have something a bit higher end, a few bells and whistles. So this is a 2247A. It's a 100 meg scope. It's got some nice features. It should make it quite nice to use. I'd been looking around for something like a 2465A, which was kind of really, that series was the pinnacle of the Tektronix analog scopes before they went to all their DSOs. I remember the DSOs of the late 90s. When I was in engineering, we used a TDS 360 200 meg DSO, and I noticed there's dozens and dozens of those kinds of things available on eBay now. But the problem is to get them here to Australia, you pay a fortune in freight. You spend as much on freight as you spend on the scope. And I would have been happy enough for a really nice scope, but some of those are fairly beaten up. So this came here in Australia, and it's as I say, it's a 2247A. The box appears to have arrived safely. I can't see any obvious damage on the box, so we're going to open this thing up, and hopefully we will have gotten ourselves a scope that can be used for a bit of analog work. The seller sold this as working as is, so I'm not sure exactly what that means. He said it was working when he tested it, but he's selling it as is. I had a look at his profile. His history indicates he's a little bit cautious in his descriptions. This is a 30-year-old scope, so I think he just wants to cover himself. But the flip side of it, if it was someone who was a bit dishonest, then there's not really nowhere to go if this thing erupts into a pile of smoke. But hopefully that won't happen. So, one Tektronix probe and one power lead. Let's have a look what we've got in here. Oops. Okay, this is looking encouraging. It's a little bit hard to do this one-handed. Okay, so that's the back at that end. This is the front. The front's the bit you're always a bit worried about because it's got all those delicate knobs on it that are easily broken. So let's pull some of these bits out. I asked him to tape up the knobs on the front. We'll see whether he actually did it or not. Okay. Oh, well. There we are. There it is. So I was quite worried about these because a lot of the ones that you see on eBay, they've all been damaged here. There's a lot of 2465s that have a similar sort of a layout with these intensity knobs down the bottom, and they just get bashed or broken off. So this has arrived intact. It didn't have that far to come. I probably wouldn't have wanted it to have come from the United States, but it only had to come a few hundred k's, so that's encouraging. So if we just turn it around and have a look at the back, we'll just get that out of the way. Okay, so there's the back. It was quite clear in the description that this foot was broken, so there's no biggie there. It actually looks very, very clean. Now, as I mentioned, some of those units on eBay, they're really, really beaten up, and you get an idea from looking underneath. Even underneath, there's only a couple of tiny scratches on the bottom. Who cares, honestly. So for a 30-year-old scope, externally it looks really, really nice. So the question is, should we be brave and just plug it in and see what happens, or should we pull it apart and see what it looks like on the inside? So what I am going to do, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this one-handed, but we'll give it a go, is the rattle test. That sounds encouraging. If you heard the classic rattle of a screw rolling around inside, that would be discouraging. So I think what I'm going to do, before I plug it in, I'm going to pull the case off and just have a look, just to make sure that it looks, there's nothing obvious on the inside. Okay, so it looks like it's got five Torx screws. So there's one here on the side, and then there's 4 in the back. Which, that one wasn't very tight at all. So just looking at the line voltage range, it gives a range of 90 to 250 volts, but I can't see a selector switch, which I think the 2465s have got. So maybe it just automatically works it out itself. Last screw. Okay. So that just pops off quite nicely. Now, it's looking encouraging. Very encouraging indeed. So it looks like it's just going to slide out. Okay, here we are. So this is the top side, and it's actually very clean inside, which is really good. There's no dust on the circuit board. No dust at all. See a date code here on this chip here, 1989, 1990. This looks like an EEPROM of some sort. It's really encouragingly clean. So if we just come around to this side, looks very clean. And then underneath, looks very, very clean. So that's very, very encouraging. Interesting little arrangement here. It's like a couple of diodes twisted together. Doesn't mean it's not factory, of course. So while I've got the lid off, I'm just going to have a closer look myself just under the Maggie lamp, just to make sure that there isn't anything of concern. And when I've done that, I'll put it back together and we'll see if it ends in smoke. I haven't put the lid on because I thought that if I turn it on and it goes bang, you'll want to see the smoke. So I've left the lid off. I had a really good look around it. It looks really, really nice actually. You can see all these little yellow tantalums, riddled with yellow tantalums. Tektronix are notorious for having problems with these tants. I've had a 7000 series mainframe and a 465, sorry, before this model, and you've really got to replace all of the tantalums. But this one's quite a bit newer, so I'm of the understanding that Tech has got their tantalum problems sorted out by the time they got to this model. So let's turn it on and see what happens. I hear clicking sounds, I hear lights, I see a display. Which of course it's out of focus because I fiddled with the knobs to show you that they weren't broken. And there's the intensity. Mode channel 2, so if we go to mode channel 1, oh there we go. Mode channel 1, and what's B intensity do? Doesn't seem to do anything. I don't know what that is. Readout, okay, that makes sense. Illumination doesn't seem to do very much, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Now the seller gave me a probe with it. So let's plug this probe in and see what happens. This probe, it doesn't seem to have a clip, but I have a clip anyway. So I'll just put this clip on and let's see what happens. Now, it has an auto setup button, so let's see what happens if I press that. It's not quite exactly what I was expecting. Oh. That looks more like it. It's so long since I've used a scope, I've virtually got to remember how to use one. AC-DC coupling. Imagine I probably want DC coupling. That's better. Okay, trigger level. Go for the good old auto setup again. Now, one of the other things that really appealed to me about this scope was that it's got these measurements here. So, voltmeter, it's got a cursor. Here's the cursors. Okay, I think I have to tell it I want. Okay, there we go. So there's the, okay, so there's the cursors there. So I think there's a multiplication issue going on here, because if I'm reading this correctly, it's saying that it's 50 millivolts and it's actually supposed to be 5 volts. I might just put this probe on and see what happens. I don't think that made much of a difference, but I'll work that out. Oh, there's a times 10 magnification there. I should probably read the manual, but where would the fun be in that? Beam find, that works. These are like your menu selections. So time, counter timer, frequency, 1 kilohertz. Look at that. And that's what it's supposed to be, 1 kilohertz, even better. So this model, it has its counter timer. It's got these fancy, it can do this measurement because it's got these counter timer things here, but also it's got these fancy trigger modes, which I'd have to do some more fiddling around to work out just what they can do. But this is an option that, this kind of functionality is an option that's available in some of the 2465 family, but not all of them. So I thought it was really nice in this 2247A to have this functionality. So really this thing is going to do everything that I need, because I'm really just going to use it for audio, and I just thought a bit of this extra functionality would be a nice thing to have. This was not expensive because I got it locally, the freight was not expensive, so it's looking good, looking like we're on a winner. So I'm going to turn it off and put the lid back on and be back in a tick. Okay, welcome back. So it's been fiddling around to work out how this thing works. It's got a lot of similarities with the 2465A, even though this is an older model. The architecture is completely different, but there's a lot of similarities in functionality. So it has 4 channels, but only channel 1 and 2 are fully functional. It's the same on the 2465. So channels 3 and 4 are limited to 0.5 or 0.1 volts per division, and they're intended primarily for triggering functions or timing functions. So channel 1 and channel 2 are the fully functional channels. Really quite interesting functions on the multimeter, if you want to call it that. It isn't really, but it sort of is. Frequency, as we saw that one before. Period, 963 microseconds. We can measure time using the cursors. We can measure volts using the cursors. Select volts, there we go, volts using the cursors. We get a voltmeter, so I can say I want peak to peak, for example. I get 0.5. Incidentally, it is supposed to be 0.5, I just couldn't read what it said on the test point because the probes were in the way. So it is meant to be 0.5. I've just noticed an interesting button here, scope bandwidth 20 meg. All the usual kind of things that you'd expect, add, subtract, invert, all those kinds of things. It has got a memory as well, which I believe is working because when I plugged it back in again, after I'd put it together, it remembered that I'd been on frequency. It's got these other menus like gated frequencies and so on. I'd have to read the manual to see how this works, but probably something to do with the triggering. I can clear the display to make that go away. Oh, there's something interesting happening here because it's on gated frequency. See how it's highlighted part of the waveform. Ah, so that's what B intensity is. I wondered why B intensity didn't do anything. So it's allowing me to do something on the waveform. I have to read the manual, which are all fully available on the internet, by the way, service manual and operator's manual. Can be downloaded as PDF, so that should tell me everything that I need to know. And if I just change this back to frequency, there we go, 1 kilohertz, as we expected. So I think that's pretty much all there is to tell you about this, but we'll call this a winner. Very happy.